When the big miners say the Pilbara can't run on battery-powered trucks before 2030, Fortescue says it can. When BHP and Rio say the diesel fuel rebate must stay, Fortescue says it must go. This is a session you won't want to miss, so can you please welcome to the stage Fortescue Mining Chief Executive Dino Otranto and our Deputy Editor of Business, Kyla Lusikian.
Shortcut.
Better side.
Right. Well, Dino, welcome. It's great to have you here in particular because I guess it's been a bit of a theme for our mining summits, but Fortescue has found itself in the midst of all of the big issues, or some of the big issues that are happening in the mining industry, from maintaining how to maintain a good relationship with China, to Indigenous affairs, and then obviously to decarbonisation and the diesel rebate and all of that. So I think maybe let's start at that last one. So BHP paid for advertising that was citing research that said that their emissions fell 36% in 5 years, and Fortescue's, by all the talk, rose 24%. What do you say to that?
It's true. Yep. We haven't shied away from the fact that we bought in a very energy-intensive operation in magnetite, and we're ramping that up. So our emissions were naturally going to go up for that. If you park that, though, our hematite business on intensity and total emissions has actually gone down. Our total portfolio will go down over the next couple of years as we bring on these trucks that don't exist. And then, in reference to, I never speak derogatory ever of our competition. Great job with BHP. We also have an exposure to Chile, and the regulation in Chile actually forces you to cut your emissions. So, that's part of our advocacy here in Australia. It'd be great to have something very similar. And I think you'll get those same results then across the industry. So
when you're talking about the Fortescue's emissions, when do you expect them to start to fall? And are you on track to that net zero target that you have put in place?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're pretty close to peak now, and we've built all of the generation, the distribution network to power. I mean, for us to decarbonise, we'd electrify everything. Half of our energy actually comes from processing plants from electricity demand, and the other half from diesel. So our diesel equivalent a year is about 800 to 900 million tonnes. And the biggest contributor of that diesel consumption is these trucks that everybody's latched onto. And yes, we don't have them yet. We've ordered them and they're coming, right? But no one will believe they exist, even though there's many examples around the world where they do exist, even in thermal coal operations, crazily enough. And they will land, and we'll run them, and they'll have teething problems, and you lot will say they don't work, and we'll get through that like we've always done.
So on the diesel point, Fortescue has launched a very public campaign about this, about the diesel rebate. Everyone's seen it, so we don't need to go into the content, but I was wondering why it is that you've decided to go public with it in such a way, and why you've decided to do that now, when it seems to me at least that there's not really any enthusiasm to make those kinds of changes, particularly from the government, and certainly not from anyone else in the industry.
Yeah, look, first on the size of the campaign, in terms of relative media campaigns and support for media outlets, it's kind of a drop in the ocean, to be honest. Running a few TV ads. Okay, and it's been blown up as this major propaganda campaign. Okay, let's call it that. Well, what are we actually advocating for? And I know that I'm bucking the trend and I'm standing out from the crowd, but we firmly believe that the current disincentives to align with both state and federal government to go green is absolutely not good enough. And we have been lobbying and advocating for that position for a long time. Everyone will talk about the road tax. Well, it's proven by government's own records the tax has not been used for road maintenance for 15 years. So that debate is horseshit. The other perspective I'd make on it is, if you look internationally, I think our credibility in if it was to pass the pub test, whether or not $5 kickback for burning diesel versus $1 to transition is that actually ever going to pass the pub test? And we can all hire smart lawyers to work out whether or not it's a rebate or it's a tax incentive. Oh my God. Like, speak to the average Joe at the pub and say, if you explained it to them, and that's why I like this Punters Politics guys, his little videos, because that's what the average person sees, and I kind of align with it. I know that, you know, I got met with a lot of criticism over the last few days. People don't like what I say. But I'd encourage you to ask any international business person, and some of them would just say, look, that's just going to change in time. Whether or not it happens this election, look, it doesn't actually matter. I think the fact we're here, the first question you asked me on stage, maybe a couple $100,000 to run a few nursing ads is having the desired effect. Who knows?
So, as you mentioned this before, but whether these massive haul trucks can be electrified seems to be has seemed to be the central question about all, you know, whether this will happen. You actually do have a truck. It's a trial truck. Is that right? How's that going? How's that?
We have a number of prototype trucks, which we're very happy with. They give you the information, like these battery electric locos that us and others are using. You basically run them in real world conditions, get a whole bunch of information off them, iterate, and then you repeat. And that is how an invention technological cycle happens. A lot of folks in this room, their business is doing that. And that's exactly what we've done. And we've gone through that. The benefit we have is we have 20 years of experience with new technology, the first to pioneer autonomy when no one was even thinking about it. We've got that running, the largest autonomous fleet in the world. The same type of software system will be governing these electric trucks. By the way, if you want to buy an operating software that's agnostic to any trucks, come and see me. We're starting to sell that too. Built by miners, for miners, no OEMs. Right? So, do we have confidence in this? It's not about confidence. We have to make it work. We've committed this, right? So we will make it work. And like I said, will it have some teething issues? Absolutely. If it didn't, we wouldn't be pushing the boundaries of what's possible, okay? So yes, we have some trucks. There's some photos of it. Four Corners showed them the other night. If you want to have a look at it. I know you guys don't like talking about other people, but you know, the three trucks are there. You know, one's Roadrunner, one's battery electric, one is a hybrid mule with hydrogen. You know,
I guess my question was more like when you obviously, but you know, they're doing things and you know, and you're having a look at the results. Like, what are you seeing in terms of, are they comparable? What are the challenges that you think you're going to have to address? You know, those kinds of like actually on the ground issues rather than the, you know, the policy and all of that kind of thing.
If you want to talk to trucks specifically, I will get to it. I'm not trying to shy away from it. Electric excavator, for instance, on a cable reel, proven technology, had some teething issues. They're producing better than our diesel fleet already, okay? Significantly better. The design of our first production-ready electric trucks, battery electric trucks, are on a Liebherr electric, diesel electric truck. So to give you guys some confidence, Liebherr's already got an electric truck. It's just powered by a diesel engine like your Prius, okay? We're just taking out that diesel engine and putting in a battery pack. So the motors, the way that the braking system, the integration, all of that already works, okay? What we are concerned about and the challenges we had to overcome is charging rates. So the first question I get, okay, you can build it now that they've seen it and we've proven that, but your charging doesn't work. How does the fuel truck work and all that? Okay, cool. No, that's exactly right. So my analogy is your mobile phone, right? Who maybe my wife's the exception, but who runs their phone all the way to 0 and then charges it up, right? I'm the kind of guy that would stick it on a charger every now and then. So your utilisation or your use of it is almost 100%. But you would argue, by the time you chuck it in, you're not using it. Well, yeah, I get it, but it's downtime. So we have looked at under every nook and cranny in our business to find downtime, and we're installing over 70 high voltage, so we're talking megawatt chargers to charge these things. But to answer your question, from 0 to 100, it's about 20 minutes to charge these things, okay? But that's not how we're going to be using them. We need these things to be productive. And the reason why our unit costs are so low and getting lower with taking diesel off our balance sheet is because we utilise our fleet probably better than anyone in the industry. We get more out of our trucks, we have less downtime, and that's always been the philosophy of Fortescue, is you install something, don't waste the checkbook in installing it, and just run it flat out. And you might be surprised on what you get. Our rail network, 155 million tonnes design capacity, we're currently running 192 million tonnes of the system. Nobody thinks that's even possible. And we're using Chinese steel, which everyone thought we were batshit crazy for using at the time because everyone else used Japanese steel. Well, guess what? It lasted 20 years.
Just on you raised the Prius. If you can iron out all the issues and solve all those problems, not problems, the things that you need to get those electric haul trucks working, what does that mean for the likes of Caterpillar and similar? They're going to go the way of the Commodore, or?
I'm not going to get drawn into that one. That's another headline. But for me, and I don't need any more of that. My export on Friday night is going to taste good this week. The Basso pub, you can come and meet me there. The question is whether or not electrification is going to happen or not. Okay, I came from an underground mining world where you have to have electrification. The largest network of underground mines in Canada, because of diesel fuel particulate emissions, they had to electrify. The thermal coal operations in Queensland are electrified with drag lines and cable reelers. You've got mines now, open pit thermal coal mines, which is really interesting. It's a paradox, right? Because they're not doing this for climate change, running fully autonomous on electric equipment.
Can I ask you about the locomotives as well, before we move on to something else? How big of an emitter are they for Fortescue, and what are your hopes about getting that down? Because that must be an even more complicated thing to solve for.
Technologically wise, they're not actually that complicated to solve for. First question is about 15% of our total emissions, so it's material, okay? And I've been saying that we're not there yet in terms of the economics to make it work. Most trains around the world for civilian passenger, Melbourne tram system, the Perth train system, is all electric, right? The problem with our trains is they're 3 kilometres long, carry 40,000 tonnes, up 400 metre RL differential. You then fill them up and then you brake it, put them on brakes all the way down. Very, very inefficient. But diesel is an exceptional combustion thermodynamic. Hydrocarbons are amazing. I'm not going to argue with that, right? And the torque that you need to actually push it up the hill is huge. It's, I joke because I like, and I have a V8 Land Cruiser, mate. I love my 79 series, go off-road all the time. I went to Corbray the other day, guess who's bogged is an EV four-wheel drive, right? And I'm like, okay, here we go. I can just see this headline. Now, that will be solved. And what will solve that is the next generation of battery intensity. And BYD is just about to release a car with a 1,038 kilometre range, underneath the luxury car tax threshold, even the new one. And it's called a Blade Cell 2 battery, which is basically twice the intensity on the same size. That type of technology, and solid state's around the corner, will just slip into the locomotives we actually built already here in Perth, and then it'll become economic. The other evolution is charging and power rails. So, when you see the spark on the Melbourne tram or the Perth train station here, that voltage is actually relatively low. High voltage transmission through power lines, that technology is exponentially increasing. So you can put megawatts now through a power rail. So our initial design was you run a big power rail all the way across the Pilbara. That is never going to fly. But now, maybe you can do it in a 10 kilometre stretch. And you'll think, well, the technology doesn't exist. Well, you know what? You can already get an electric 240-tonne truck that has a power rail that charges itself.
Before we move off decarbonisation, which I want to...
But I know, no one's going to believe us, okay? I used to work for the big shops.
Why do you think that?
Because you lot are actually at fault. And this is the reason, because in the mining industry, we have been hammered for deployment of capital. We've been named as wasting capital. So generally, we become ultra-conservative. So there's no way that somebody is going to risk what we're doing at Fortescue. Now, we have a very different risk appetite, okay? And over the years, it's proven to be the best value return for the shareholder. But generally speaking, I can appreciate that. It's a little bit like me. I'm not going to buy a electric four-wheel drive yet because my V8 diesel souped up 79 series is a good car and I love it. It makes a good sound and I'm a bogan. So, but at some point when the cost and performance will get better, my daily is an electric car.
So do you
Mini Cooper.
Do you think that'll be the case in mining once everyone sees that Fortescue's managed to get these things going?
I'm not going to comment on that. You guys be the judge, right? Who would have thought BYD's penetration in Australia is up 541%,
Yep.
right? Zika. I mean, for Christ's sake, who even heard about what Zika was? Now the 7X is everywhere, right? It's an amazing... I've got stories of people selling their Audis buying the 7X.
Just before we move on to something else, before we run out of time, I did want to ask you about something that was in the financial review that Tom wrote today, that you had written to the Chamber of Minerals and Energy, and you were complaining essentially that they were taking BHP side. I mean, those are my words, when it came to the diesel issue. Have you heard back, and do you think it's fair that they... I mean, presumably most of their members would support that position. Do you think it's fair that they're putting it like that?
Yeah, look, I did get a bit hot under the collar, to be honest. And I did write a note, didn't name anyone. What I was trying to point out is industry associations, my baseline expectation. Let me use a footy analogy, right? My three boys play footy. Second one ain't too good, right? But we still pay fees to the club, right? And my expectation is my kid actually gets a bit of game time. And that's what happens, right? But for me, this is the second time this has happened. The peak industrial body here in WA, I don't think adequately consulted, irrespective of the outcome or the position. And this is the differential. And I don't want to conflate these two items. There was no consultation on that period. And I thought it was, to be honest, the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life. Somebody to come out, be a de facto spokesperson, and the company didn't even turn up. Don't you think it's odd?
Anyway, earlier this month... this is a serious topic. Earlier this month, the federal court, I did want to ask you about this before we ran out of time, it found that Fortescue had destroyed more than 100 cultural heritage sites, and you had to pay $150 million in penalties. I was wondering what your takeaways were from that decision, and what you would do differently. And thirdly, this is three questions in one, but thirdly, there's been a little bit of commentary about how Rio was, they seem to be held to a slightly different standard. They were in a lot more, they faced a lot more criticism. What do you think of that?
Again, I'm definitely not going to be drawn into making a comment on Rio Tinto. And what I'd say, these are very serious issues. They're not, in my view, for media headlines and selling paper. These are real issues that date back thousands and thousands of years. And I'm absolutely adamant that, particularly in West Australia, our respect for First Nations groups, I mean, we don't even educate it in schools, right, the way we should be. We need to all take a big step up in that space. In terms of the legal process, which is still underway, by the way, an award has been settled. We weren't satisfied that an award had to be settled. We've been trying to negotiate an outcome with Injumanji for some time. We've taken all adequate steps internally to protect everything. We've surveyed everything. And in fact, we look forward to, I think, turning the page on the relationship and see what we can do. I was very encouraged that, speaks positively about our peers that, I don't quite think it was BHP Rio announced an energy partnership with Woodley's mob, and I think that's fantastic. I think the energy future of the Pilbara is undoubtedly right in front of us, and I'm encouraged by taking the next step and closing that chapter for us.
And the third thing I mentioned right at the start was China. I think it's not controversial to say that Fortescue has had a far smoother relationship, well, at least on the outside, from the little that we can glean sometimes. I was wondering whether you might be able to give us a little bit of colour about what your strategy has been in terms of making sure that relationship stays as smooth as it possibly can, and whether you have seen perhaps any shift in like the power balance between buyer and seller.
It's completely different. Okay, as I started in the industry, it was at the back of the iron ore price wars with Japan, and it kind of sometimes feels a little bit like that, and maybe that's where we're heading, which is where there's a lot of anxiousness. I was physically there in 2022 in Beijing, looking around the room. I'm not sure, there's one fella that was with me who I saw at dinner last night. We were invited to this hall like this, 10 seats on the table, 5 for the iron ore miners, 5 for the steel mills. Up pops a schematic of the profit margins of all 10 of us. One of them was a private company, by the way, on our side, and that was spot on. And we looked at each other and go, whoa. But the contrast was stark. 70 to 80% profit margins on one side, which was us, minus margins on the other side. And then the CMRG new president and the CMRG concept was wheeled out. And the title of the slide was Shared Prosperity. And everybody started to clap and dragons, and we all looked at each other and thought, it's on, okay? And I think from that point on, though, there were very divergent strategies. What was clear behind the scenes in that conversation was the days of you lot, Australians and the Brazilians, getting all your money through banks from the US, the trade in US dollars, and all your equipment from the US is over. This supply chain needs to be more beneficial from everybody. So we have pivoted significantly our supply, our financing, our trading strategy. But I will say that that does not mean that we are not immune to the same type of arm wrestles at the conversation. I'm actively involved in them myself. Our chairman's actively involved with them. We've met with them. And the conversation will be ongoing for a long period of time. They've been given a clear mandate, and that supply chain needs to be liberated to the east, because remember, we're buying 95% of your product, buddy, and all that profit margin is going somewhere else. That's got to stop.
Well, we are unfortunately out of time, but could everyone please thank Dino?
Thanks, mate.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.